On behalf of Trinayani, a warmest welcome. What better way of celebrating Human Rights Day than to talk about accessibility? Everybody here is aware of the fact that for most of us, accessibility makes things easier, but for our friends with disabilities, it actually makes things possible. And that's why it is so important.
Accessibility is something that we all have been working towards. We have faced problems because of this. We have been trying to make changes in the world, in the society that we live. We're trying to indicate uh, problem areas. We are trying to get the law implemented. The ministries are developing guidelines on accessibility of different areas. All many ministries are coming out with the sector specific guidelines.
The first and foremost challenge before every government is the trained human resource, the technical knowledge about the accessibility, the standards, the provisions of the law. The challenge to create accessibility in the cities, in the entire cities, in accordance with the provisions of the law, that is the RPWD Act, which says within 5 years you must make every public building accessible. The provision in the law perhaps is unrealistic, one. Number two, making that accessible, that the organization, the governments have not taken it so seriously. There is no action plan. The Act says action plan should be made. Then there is a provision that you can extend this. Nobody has applied for extension. So it's not just possible to follow those standards. We have not yet really calculated, worked out what will be the expense. Access audits itself is so expensive, then making those places accept that these are the big challenges for the existing infrastructure.
The general approach, I mean, as an architect, and when we approach a design with a very basic understanding. See that accessibility is well taken care of. I have provided few ramps, lifts, and given the parking area, the preferred parking area. Now I rather concentrate on more important things, what as an architect I believe in. I do not see sustainability as a complete until unless I include accessibility into it, or rather universal design into it. Sustainability is an incomplete topic if not added along with the accessibility.
So the first thing that I come across as a challenge is the toilet issue. I mean, in slums, urban slums, every house doesn't have their own toilet. They use public washrooms. And for people with disability who are staying in such kind of slums, they need to have an accessible washrooms nearby their place, which is not there, or which is not to be considered by the corporations or by the local bodies and so on and so forth. The second is, though the government supports or the private organizations like NGO supports with wheelchairs and everything, there are narrow pathways, uneven surfaces, uneven pathways. So, if you talk about slums, Kentucky urban slums, it's a nightmare.
I think it has to be done. The implementation has to be done in a mission mode. There should be mission mode at the center, and then in the states we should have the task force. In each district, we should have a accessibility officer who would be responsible to ensure, to inform the constructing agencies about the need, about the mandate rather, in the law to make this any infrastructure accessible, built environment accessible. And in case of non-compliance, then that it should be the responsibility of that accessibility officer to bring it to the notice of the State Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities, who is responsible for monitoring the implementation of the Act and the laws. Also, the concern department, say the governments, I would say, I'll break it down to the department in a small office, should make provision for enough funds to make the facilities inside the complex accessible. We need to have full-time commissioner. We need to have very, very energetic and passionate people to work in this sector. नौकरी करके ही नहीं हो जाएगा कुछ भी.
The students are not aware. They are not sensitized. Doesn't matter how good of a design they are. We have asked them to create a stadium for people with disabilities. Now, the references that they used overall are these stadiums. I mean, I'm not. What would they do? In India, there are no stadiums or no sport facilities available which would guide them or tell them that, see, these are the minimum standards of accessibility. Or there's no practicing, there's no examples for these kids to really look into. Architects take it, or the clients take it as a tick mark, as a checkbox, because you have to waive off RPWD guidelines. So it's not there that designs are not there, Subhashji. It's about the sensitivity.
Of course, the obvious thing is that the standards which have been prescribed by the central government, that is Ministry of Urban Development, and notified by Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, Government of India, in the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Rules 2017, have to be used. That is what is not happening. Again, the issue is creating that awareness, creating that capacity building among the implementers. It is not only the engineer, it is not only the architect. It is also the mason who actually does this work.
So, Subhashi, I have a viewpoint on this, very strong viewpoint, that if something is coming through a legal requirement, I have an option to choose or not to choose, at least in India. When I'm not choosing, I have an option of probably paying a small fine, or probably in a real world scenario, paying a bribe and get away with it. My point is, until unless there is a incentive attached to it. So even in sustainability, we've been working very hard in sustainability and trying to get, in affordable housing, we are trying to integrate energy efficiency, water efficiency and whatnot. But then these efficiencies are adapted or adopted by these developers or these private developers because, for a very simple reason, they have been incentivized. They have been incentivized by ADB. They have been incentivized by different financial institutions. They have been incentivized by institutions like World Bank. If I'll talk about accessibility and universal design, even in SDGs, what we call about sustainability development goals, there is no separate chapter or identifying accessibility as a topic to be taken care of. It does not define, it does not ask, it does not give you any requirement, or it does not really create that incentivization for either for the developer or for the designers to adopt such aspect to it. So until unless at the policy level we incentivize and we acknowledge that this is a need, penalization or punitive action on any developer doesn't help. Until unless there is a change in approach of how do you look at it, the project planning, the institutions have to work together. There has to be a discussion, there has to be a roundtable discussion on every aspect of it. The problem will persist, and accessibility is the victim of negligence and gross ignorance.
All stakeholders need to come together. Governments have to adopt a unified system. We had an effort of unified building bylaws in terms of building. So the guidelines issued under the RPWD Act eventually must be accepted as the sole guideline across the country. We need in different states checks and mechanisms that will not just be of the government people who are sensitized, trained to do things well, but also an equally aware group of citizens and including stakeholder citizens who may have disabilities also playing an active role of a watchdog. And each state's commissioner for persons with disabilities need to get activated, need to be independent, and all people must be like full-time so that they can do their job correctly.